Hello and welcome to the Street Crime Australia YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're going to look at the history of the notorious Australian criminal Carl Williams. Carl Anthony Williams was born on the 13th of October 1970 and was an Australian convicted murderer and drugs trafficker from Melbourne, Victoria. He was a central figure in the Melbourne Gangland killing, as well as its final victim. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 35 years for ordering the murders of 3 people and conspiracy to murder a 4th, which was unsuccessful. On the 19th of April 2010, whilst incarcerated at HMP Barwon, Mr. Williams was beaten to death with a stem of an exercise bike by another inmate, Matthew Charles Johnson. Mr. Williams enlisted the help of others willing to perform the contract killing in exchange for large payments of cash. At the time of his death, he was in the maximum security Acacia unit of HM Prison Barwon near Geelong. Mr. Williams would have been 71 before he was eligible for parole. Mr. Williams attended Broadmeadows Technical School, leaving in year 11. He had spent much of his childhood in Western Melbourne with his friends and older brother Shane, who died of a heroin overdose in 1997. He was married to convicted drug trafficker Roberta Mercica, who was born on the 23rd of March 1969, with whom he had one daughter, Dakota Williams, who was born on the 10th of March 2001. Mr. Williams held various labouring jobs before opening a children's clothing store in partnership with his wife, which eventually failed. On the 25th of November 1999, Mr. Williams, along with his father George and another associate, were arrested and charged with drug trafficking after a raid on an illegal drug factory at Fur Close Unit in Broadmeadows. In excess of 25,000 amphetamine tablets were seized by police, estimated to be worth 20 million Australian dollars. Mr. Williams, who described himself as a semi-professional gambler, was banned from the Crown Casino on the 2nd of April 2004 by the Police Commissioner Christine Nixon under the Casino Control Act. Mr. Williams' mother, Barbara Williams, was found dead in her Melbourne home in November 2008, having overdosed on an unspecified drug in an act of suicide. She had been suffering from depression. On the 13th of October 1999, Mr. Williams was shot in the abdomen by James Moran because he owed the Moran family $80,000. This event sparked a lengthy underworld war known more commonly as the Melbourne Gangland killing. In 2002, after meeting through a mutual friend, Tony McBell, Mr. Williams courted the services of the murderer Andrew Veneman as his right-hand man until late 2004. Mark Moran was shot on the 15th of June 2000 after arriving at his home. Mr. Williams was due to stand trial for his murder, but the charge was dropped when he pleaded guilty to other murders. On the Saturday morning of the 21st of June 2003, Jason Moran and a colleague, Kwali Barbaro, were shot fatally in a car park Cross Keys Hotel in Strathmore, Melbourne, where Mr. Moran and Mr. Barbaro had brought 5 children to attend an Auskick football clinic. The clinic had just finished, and many adults and children were standing around. Mr. Moran and Mr. Barbaro sat in the front seats of Mr. Moran's minivan, the 5 young children sitting in the rear. A gunman approached and fired both a shotgun and a handheld gun into the vehicles. Men died at the scene. 3 years earlier, a shotgun and a handgun had been used to gun down Mr. Moran's half-brother Mark. 2 of the children in the minivan were Mr. Moran's, and all were aged under 7. Gunman, nicknamed the Runner, before he was identified as Victor Brincat, later told police that Carl Williams was the person who paid him to kill Mr. Moran and Mr. Barbaro, and that Mr. Williams had paid him less than the $100,000 fee that he had promised originally. Mr. Williams later pleaded guilty to the murder of Jason Moran. Mark Malia was an associate of the murderer underworld criminal Nick Radev. At 8:05 AM on the 18th of August 2003, a fire was reported in the stormwater drain on Sunshine. Fire brigade members attended to the fire, recovered a wheelie bin containing the remains of a charred body inside, later identified as Mr. Mamilla. Mr. Marshall was shot outside his luxury South Yarra home in front of his 5-year-old son on the 25th of October 2003. Lewis Moran was fatally shot in the Inner City Brunswick Club on the 31st of March 2004. Mr. Williams pleaded guilty to his murder. On the 28th of February 2007, Mr. Williams pleaded guilty in the Supreme Court of Victoria to the murders of Lewis Moran, his son Jason Moran, and Mark Melilla, whose name was initially suppressed by the court. Mr. Williams also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder Gangland rival Mario Condello. A suppression order prevented the media from reporting this until the day of sentencing. Under a deal with the police, Mr. Williams was not charged for his alleged involvement in orchestrating the murder of Mark Moran, Jason Moran's half-brother. It was also revealed that Mr. Williams was serving a sentence of 21 years for the 2003 murder of Michael Marshall. The outcome of this trial had previously been suppressed. The summary of the criminal convictions of Mr. Williams were as follows. In May 1990, he was convicted of handling stolen goods, possession of stolen property, and failing to answer bail. He was fined $400 as well. In March 1993, he was charged with criminal damage, throwing a missile, and sentenced to 150 hours community work. In December 1994, he was charged with attempting to traffic a drug of dependence and sentenced to 12 months imprisonment, 6 months suspended for a 2-year period. On the 29th of October 2004, he was convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 7 years in prison. On the 19th of July 2006, he was convicted of the murder of Michael Marshall and sentenced to 27 years imprisonment with a 21-year non-parole period. On the 7th of May 2007, he was convicted for the murder of Jason Moran, Mark Melilla, and Lewis Moran and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was also convicted of the conspiracy to murder Mario Condello and sentenced to 25 years in prison. On the 19th of April 2010, News Limited newspapers, including the Herald Sun, revealed that Victoria Police were paying $8,000 in school fees for Mr. Williams' daughter. The reason for the payment was not revealed at the time. Later, during the 2011 murder trial, it was revealed that Mr. Williams had turned informant and had struck a deal with the Assistant Commissioner, Simon Overland. Mr. Williams gave information on several unsolved murder cases believed to have been involved in corrupt officers, and it also revealed his murderer may have been implicated in at least one of those cases. Mr. Williams' lawyer, Rob Starry, said, Mr. Williams was upset about the publication of the story. There was speculation that the police may have agreed to pay the school fees in exchange for information and that the publication of the story may have led to the death of Mr. Williams. The Herald Sun defended its publication of the story. On the 19th of April 2010, Mr. Williams died from a head injury whilst incarcerated at Barwon Prison. He was struck with a part of an exercise bike by another inmate, Matthew Charles Johnson, who was convicted of the murder and sentenced in December 2011 to 32 years in jail. Mr. Williams' funeral was held on the 30th of April 2010 at St. Reese's Catholic Church in Essendon. He was buried in a golden coffin. In January 2011, it was reported that Mr. Williams' resting place consisted of a nameless plot without a headstone. The circumstances of his death were investigated by the Victorian Ombudsman. A report critical of the Corrections Victoria for approving Mr. Williams to share a cell with Mr. Johnson was released in April 2012. 2 months later, in June 2012, the Department of Justice Secretary Penny Armitage resigned, and earlier in May, the Corrections Victoria Commissioner Bob Hastings had resigned. Mr. Williams was portrayed by 2008 Australian television series Underbelly, based on the events surrounding the Melbourne Gangland Wars from 1995 up until his arrest in 2004. In 2014, Mr. Grantley reprised the role in Fat Tony & Co. and again in 2020 in Informer 3838. Join us today. What are your opinions on the crimes committed by Mr. Williams? Do you think the publication of his story by the media was the cause of his death? Do you believe he had more crimes to confess to the police? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Street Crime Australia content, please subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.